It's time for the real Jonathan Smith Show. This is Indy Sports Ticket 1430 AM, 93.9 HD2, and always on the free Indy Sports Ticket app.
What's going on? It's the real Jonathan Smith Show here on Indy Sports Ticket. Hopefully you've had a nice start to your week. I know I did. Watched some excellent basketball last night. Houston beating the Celtics. That game was great. Amen Thompson. Remember that name. That dude's a stud. I don't know if you caught Arizona and Iowa State as well. Caleb Love chucking from near half court, knocking it down. Just really impressive. Basketball's the best. Something, though, that is not the best is the Indianapolis Colts. And as I continue to look at the Eagles and look at the Chiefs and these two Super Bowl rosters, even looking at, the Commanders and the Bills. And then I think about the Colts. And they're just so far away from being anywhere near as good as those other teams, and yet we're going to run it back with Chris Ballard for year 9. Maybe things will change this year. The Colts, compared to the Chiefs and Eagles, it's not even close. The play at quarterback isn't good enough. If Anthony Richardson had been the starting quarterback for the Eagles, arguably the best roster in the NFL, I'd be willing to bet the Eagles would not have made it to the Super Bowl. And that's, once again, despite having arguably the best roster in the NFL. If Patrick Mahomes, best quarterback in the NFL, if you plugged him into this Colts roster, do we really think that the Colts would be playing for a Super Bowl if they had Patrick Mahomes? I would argue no. The defense wouldn't be good enough. The receivers, would be fine because you have Mahomes, but there'd just be a lot of issues on the defensive side of the ball. And as great as Patrick Mahomes is, if he played for the Colts, I don't think that they would be competing to hoist a Lombardi this year. And what's concerning about all of this is the Colts are running it back. Year 9 of Chris Ballard, year 3 of Shane Steichen, and they have to win right now. If they don't win right now, I would like to think that their jobs are gone, but then again, given the history of Jim Irsay, who really knows? And what's concerning is the Colts aren't going to have enough opportunities to address all of their needs this offseason because the Colts have a lot of needs. Colts have 7 picks in this year's NFL draft, one in each and every single round. Let's be honest. Once you get past the 3rd round, it's tough to draft players that show up and contribute immediately. It's just the reality of it. Most of the guys that start in the NFL are 1st, 2nd, or 3rd round picks. Occasionally you'll get lucky and you'll find a Jalen Jones or a Zaire Franklin in the 7th round. But let's be honest, the Colts could upgrade from that. And then you look at the cap situation. Colts are 18th going into the offseason in cap space. They have a little over $28 million available to them this offseason. It's not a ton of money to throw around. The Colts could add 2 or 3 good proven players, or they could add 1 quarterback. Right? If it's Sam Darnold, he would take up most of that $28 million. That means that as of today, if the Colts did everything perfectly, they could add 6, maybe 7 day 1 impact players for this next season. But in order to do that, they'd have to hit on all 3 of their picks in the first 3 rounds, which, let's just be honest, Chris Ballard's not hitting on all 3 of his first 3 picks in this year's draft. Okay, this roster also needs more help than just 6 or 7 players. They need at least 1 starting caliber cornerback. They need at least 1 safety, and hopefully it's not Julian Blackmon. They need a quarterback. They need 2 or 3 offensive linemen, not to start, but just for depth, because as soon as they had a couple guys go down, the offensive line play struggled for several weeks. So they need a couple more offensive linemen for depth. They need a couple more defensive linemen for depth. The depth that we were sold on last offseason was not there this year. They've got to find a way to create depth along both fronts. That means we're in the exact same spot that we were in last year. The exact same spot. Free agency moves need to be made, but let's just be honest. I don't think anyone's expecting for anything to happen. You know, like hopefully Chris Ballard can draft well, fingers crossed there. And we are once again going to be reliant on young players getting better. Like, in order for the Colts to be good next year, Anthony Richardson has to get better. In order for this Colts defense to take a positive step in the correct direction, Leatu Latu has to get better. We're relying on Adonai Mitchell and Juju Brents and Jalen Jones and just continue going down the list of all these younger players improving better. And that just doesn't inspire a ton of confidence, for me at least, in this team next year. Because Colts players, as of late, do not tend to get better. Like, just did Josh Downs really get better from last year to this year? He felt like the exact same player. He's going to run slants and drag routes and all those things. And if he gets the ball in space, he might scamper for, 5 or 6 extra yards, but he didn't improve by leaps and bounds. Michael Pittman Jr. still kind of feels like the same player he's been ever since his second year in the league. Good route runner, bigger guy, right? Kind of works the middle of the field well, but that's really it. I know Alec Pierce's numbers went up, but I don't think it was because he got better. I just think it was because he got more opportunities down the field to do the thing that he does well. It's not like he started running great routes and was creating separation underneath and in the intermediate parts of the field. He just finally had a quarterback who could push the ball down the field. Okay, Jelani Woods, who was, a second-round pick a couple years ago, he hasn't gotten better. He's another rotational piece at tight end. Okay, Kwity Paye has gotten a little bit better, right? Went from 4 sacks to 6.5 sacks his second year to 8.5 sacks his third year to 8 sacks this year. So he's gotten a little bit better. But the only 2 players in recent Colts draft history that have legitimately improved have been Bernard Raymond, who was a third-round pick at offensive tackle and is now a solid NFL left tackle, and Nick Cross, which, for Nick Cross, he could only go up. That's really it. Those are the only 2 players that in recent Colts draft history, like the last 3 or 4 years, that have legitimately improved and gotten better. And yet here we are once again relying on the Colts' development of young players. And as I just laid out, it hasn't been there these past couple years. Okay, and the Colts are going to have to make some sort of move to acquire more opportunities to get more players that could help them immediately. Maybe they cut players to create more cap room so they can sign a couple more free agents. That probably won't happen. Maybe they trade a player like Jonathan Taylor. They call the Chiefs or the Eagles someone who's pretty well established and needs a running back. Maybe they call them and they offer up Jonathan Taylor and they get, a second-round pick in return. Maybe they, for some reason, trust Adonai Mitchell to improve in the offseason. So they offer up Alec Pierce for, a second or third-round pick. Maybe they do something like that. I doubt it. What's probably going to happen, and I just want you to be prepared for this, is the Colts will not draft Tyler Warren or whatever player you want them to take at 14. They're going to trade down from that spot because that's Chris Ballard's favorite thing to do. He stays up late at night and he dreams about it. He'll be staring off into space and his wife would be like, Chris, what are you thinking about? Because women do that. I don't know why they do that, but they do. And he'll be like, I can't wait to trade down and acquire a couple extra 6th-round picks. Seriously, either way, the history of the Colts tells us not to rely on players getting better in the offseason. And because of that, I fully expect for Chris Ballard to do something to generate an opportunity to add more players to this roster that desperately needs an injection of talent because there's just a lack of that across the board. Speaking of talent, the Colts don't have it. I saw this tweet yesterday that said, quote, only one AFC defensive coordinator has ever stopped Mahomes in the playoffs. Talking about Lou Anarumo and that 2021 Bengals team. And, part of why I expect for Chris Ballard to make a move to add more players is because they have a new defensive coordinator, right? And I'm sure that he's going to need certain types of players to play his style of defense. I'm not, I don't know enough about how all that stuff works, but I'm willing to bet that there are certain players on this Colts roster. He's going to be like, rather not use that guy. Would rather have a guy similar to this build or with this kind of speed or whatever. And hopefully, because who knows, it's Chris Ballard. Hopefully, the Colts are going to accommodate that. Okay? With that being said, I don't know. This whole Lou Anarumo thing is something that I'm very excited about. But that 2021 Bengals team that did beat Mahomes in the playoffs, so much more talented than what the Colts have this season. Seriously. I mean, like, here are some of the players on that Bengals defense. Trey Hendrickson, who's been one of the best edge rushers in the NFL for the past, 4 or 5 years. He was on that team, had 14 and a half sacks that season. Sam Hubbard was on that team. Larry Ogunjobi, really dominant interior defensive lineman. Those three guys, that Trey Hendrickson, Sam Hubbard, and Larry Ogunjobi combination, is what Chris Ballard wants you to think DeForest Buckner, Kwity Paye, and Leatu Latu are, even though they're nowhere close to that. If the Colts had a linebacker as good as Logan Wilson, I think it would make Colts fans' heads spin. They would see a real linebacker and like what that looks like in like sideline to sideline speed, something that the Colts linebackers do not have. They would see that for the first time in a long time. Jesse Bates that season when the Bengals found a way to beat the Chiefs in the playoffs, Jesse Bates makes Nick Cross and Julian Blackmon look like pee-wee football players. Okay, that defense for that Bengals team that year was so incredibly talented. So much more talented than what the Colts are right now. Once again, the importance of them finding a way to inject talent into this roster, whether through the draft or through free agency, is so incredibly important for them this year. And like as excited as I am that Gus Bradley's no longer here, and in the words of Rick Venturi, the fact that we no longer have to see that Friday night defense anymore makes me happy. The fact that we're getting a guy coming in and Lou Anarumo who excels at making adjustments, like his defenses in the second half of games tend to fare very well. Let's get one thing straight, though. The Colts, unless major moves are made, are not going to be a top 10 defense this next season. It's not going to happen because they just simply do not have the talents and the depth on that side of the ball to be that good. If they're somewhere in the middle, if the Colts have like the 17th ranked defense in the NFL next year, that will be a major win. That will be a great season for this defense that has consistently found itself 27th, 28th, 30th in NFL defenses these last 3 years under Gus Bradley. Now, part of the Gus Bradley thing, if I'm going to defend him for 30 seconds, is he didn't have good players. Like he didn't. That's part of why the defense was so terrible. And making a change at coach doesn't always fix everything. Now, it can make things better, and I do think that Lou Anarumo will make things better, but we have to remember that you can have the best coaches in the world, but if your players aren't very good, then it doesn't really seem to matter. Bill Belichick, best coach in the history of the NFL as of right now. If Andy Reid three-peats, though, probably going to give him that crown. But remember, like, Brady and all those guys left, and Bill Belichick coached really bad football teams after that. That's just the reality of it. You can have the best coaches in the world, but if you don't have the horses to go out and to make the plays, then it doesn't really matter. Big show lined up for us today. Zach Pereles of CBS Sports, he's going to join me at 11. We're going to, keep talking about the NFL and, the Super Bowl. We're 13 or 12 days away, whatever it ends up being. So he's going to come on at 11. We're going to talk a little more Chiefs, Bills, and Eagles, Commanders, all that kind of stuff. I've got more thoughts on Indiana basketball. They're playing Purdue on Friday night in Mackey. Can't wait for that game. Actually, I can wait because I don't think that game's going to be very close. I'm going to schedule my Friday night around that game just for Purdue to win that game by 50. And then I'm going to be kind of disappointed. And then I've got a top 10 Tuesday that is lined up for today. Just a lot of stuff to get to. Just so much stuff to get to. It's a loaded show. Thanks for tuning in. Zach Pereles is coming up here in 45 minutes. And when we come back, here in about 4 minutes. I have found myself going not into a rabbit hole, but like if I get bored, I'll go back and find old Coach Knight clips of him talking about whatever I can find him talking about. And I found this clip of him, and I would just be so fascinated to see how he dealt with things in the NIL era. So I've got some audio of Coach Knight when we come back here in about 4 minutes. And it's about motivation and how he liked to motivate players. It's pretty great. So, Coach Knight audio when we come back here in about 4 minutes.
Unadulterated sports talk with unfiltered takes. It's the real Jonathan Smith Show on Indy Sports Ticket, 1430 AM and 99.5 HD2.
The real Jonathan Smith Show here on Indy Sports Ticket. Hopefully you're having a nice week. Thanks for tuning in no matter how you are tuning in, whether that's YouTube, Indy Sports Ticket, if you want to head over there and subscribe. Top 200 subs yesterday. So thank you to everyone who's over there subscribing to the channel, watching the feed over there, being active in the chat. It is greatly appreciated. You can also watch the show on Twitter. Follow me there at _ Jonathan Smith. You can also listen via that Indy Sports Ticket app, which you can download wherever you get your apps. Or you can also listen on 1430 AM. I know that they did some work on the tower yesterday, so hopefully it sounds pretty good today. Indiana basketball is in shambles. No other way to really put it. Just absolute shambles. Dan Dockich, who's on this station from noon to 3, once again, download that Indy Sports Ticket app so you can tune into him every day. Dan Dockich said on his show yesterday that he's got sources telling him that players don't respect Mike Woodson. Apparently, there have been multiple instances where Omar Ballo has told Coach Woodson to F off, I'm not running, I'm not practicing, I'm not doing whatever. And, I wasn't around for the days of Coach Knight. I really wish I had been. And so I find myself going back and finding old clips of him and just curiously wondering, how would he deal with players today? How would he deal with NIL stuff? And as I was, looking for Coach Knight audio, I stumbled across this clip where Coach Knight talks about the best way to motivate players. Here's Coach Knight talking about the best way to get players to play hard.
You can talk about all the motivational speeches and phrases and devices in the world, but the greatest motivator of all is your ass on the bench. There is no better motivator. Ass meets bench. Bench retains ass. Ass transmits signal to brain. Brain transmits signal to body. Body gets ass off bench and plays better. It's a hell of a sequence of things that takes place. Well, it might be for you guys.
Coach Knight right there talking about how if you sit guys, they usually get them to play a little bit better. And that is still true today. I'm with Coach Knight. If you bench someone, it is one of the best ways to get someone to play better. With that being said, I don't think it's still the best way to get a college athlete to play well now. I would argue that now is to mess with their NIL money. Like that is how you get through to people. You watch, the NFL, I think one of the dumbest things I heard any NFL coach say this year was Mike McDaniel, head coach of the Miami Dolphins, and they've had issues with players showing up late. And someone asked him, like, why don't you find guys when they show up late? And he had this really dumb answer of how, it's me and all. No, find them. I promise. When you start messing with people's money, they straighten up pretty quickly. If your boss came to you and said, hey, we're going to cut your pay unless you start doing X, Y, and Z, you would probably start doing X, Y, and Z. Just saying. The best way to get through to a college athlete now is to mess with their NIL money. I did some research last night because I've had this question of, can coaches take away NIL money? How does that work? And here's what I found out. Since Indiana is not paying the players directly, they cannot fine players or reduce checks. However, let's say, Mark Cuban, he's fitting the bill for Omar Ballo. Okay, let's say Mark Cuban gave $500,000 to help pay for Omar Ballo to come to Indiana. If Mark Cuban wants to, he can step in and reduce Omar Ballo's pay based on whatever the contract says. That needs to happen immediately. Mike Woodson needs to get on, his phone. He can do it while he's smoking his cigars and drinking his wine. That's fine. Get on the phone. Call all of your donors who are fitting the bill for NIL and get them to start reducing these payers' pay. Okay, they're 14-7. Their best win is USC, who's 12-7, that alone should result in all of these players losing money from their NIL deals. Okay, now look, I don't know all the ins and outs of how these contracts work, but I have an idea. NIL contracts from here on out should work like NFL contracts. The base salary should be incredibly low. Okay, like I'm thinking around 10% of whatever your NIL deal is should be guaranteed. So let's just, to make numbers easy, let's say that your NIL deal is worth $100,000. Then $10,000 of that is fully guaranteed. No matter how good, bad, or sad you play, you get $10,000. Everything else after that should be incentive based. And most of the incentives, if I was creating these contracts, should be team based. Pay them an X amount of dollars for making the tournaments. Pay them an X amount more dollars if they win the Big Ten. Pay them an X amount more if they make the Sweet 16, and so on. Because when you look at these NIL deals, players have to do certain things for them. So for example, there was a guy named KJ Jefferson who used to play quarterback at the University of Arkansas. The Waltons are graduates of and big donors at the University of Arkansas. So they signed KJ Jefferson to this deal. So not only did he have to play football, but he would also have to, like, once every couple weeks, do some sort of like Walmart advertisement video. Takes him like 30 seconds. Okay. Like, these dudes shouldn't be making $500,000 for doing a 30-second ad read, for crying out loud. Okay. Make the money incentive based. Push these guys to actually buy in and play as a team. Because look, like, if you're Omar Ballo or you're Trey Galloway or Anthony Leal or any one of those guys, and you're just like handed money, and it's like you get, $500,000, no matter how good or bad Indiana is this year, then it's like, what's the point? Because obviously you'd like to think that these guys are competitive and that they have a little bit of pride, but like, you're 14-7, you're probably not going to make the tournament. So, like, why even work hard? Like, you're getting your money. That is why I think from here on out, teams, coaches should do everything that they can to make these NIL deals incentive based. Like, if you're blindly handing out money to people between the ages of 18 and 23, then that's just like, that's enough for them. A lot of these players know that they are not going to the league. Like, Trey Galloway knows that his best chance to keep playing basketball is to go to Europe. Same thing with a lot of these guys. And so once they get that money, it's like, all right, cool, I'm good. You'd think that, pride and competitiveness and all those things would be enough to get guys to play hard, but that clearly isn't the case anymore. Money changes everything really quickly. So if I was Mike Woodson or any other coach in the country, that is how I would try to structure NIL deals. Because you just know that the boosters at Kansas have got to be pissed that they're paying AJ Storr, all that money to not even play. Okay. The Dawkins kid who was at Illinois last year and is now playing at Kansas State and apparently got some like $1 million NIL deal. Whoever's fitting the bill for that, that they got to be upset that he's not playing very well. The NIL contracts should be incentive based. So a small amount of guaranteed money with a heavy, heavy emphasis on team and personal incentives. Okay. There's no way these wealthy people who were, giving all this money to these college kids, there's no way that they're happy seeing their money just pissed away. Like, it's not a good investment. And I would like to think that bothers a lot of them, but maybe, just maybe, it doesn't. But they will be bothered if you're an IU booster on Friday night. Okay? Because the gap between Purdue and Indiana is, larger than the Grand Canyon. I mean, and the Grand Canyon's long. It's like 27 miles long. It's a long way. Yeah, the gap's way wider than that. Purdue is better than Indiana at just about every single spot. They are. Purdue has better guards than Indiana. Like, Braden Smith and Fletcher Loyer have shown up at Purdue and done nothing but win. What's Trey Galloway done? Made the tournament once, twice, maybe? What's Miles Rice done? Oh, he's the freshman of the year in the Pac-12. Yeah, great. That's great for you, Miles Rice. Purdue has better guards than Indiana. They have more depth than Indiana. Like Purdue will play up to 9 guys in a game, and you feel pretty good about most of them. For Indiana, they play 8 guys, and one of those players is Anthony Leal, who's an absolute zero on offense. I like Leal. I think he plays hard. I think he cares more than the other guys. But if Anthony Leal's a guy that you're depending on, then just good luck. You're playing 4-on-5 on offense. Okay, they have a better coach than Indiana. Surely I don't have to explain how Matt Painter is a better coach than Mike Woodson. More importantly, they shoot the ball better than Indiana. Purdue's second in the Big Ten in three-point shooting at 38%. So they've come down a few ticks. They were at over 40% earlier in the season. Meanwhile, Indiana's 14th at 32%. Like it's not very good. The play on the perimeter for Indiana just doesn't match up with Purdue at all. Purdue is better than Indiana almost across the board. The game's at Mackey. Okay, we also know that things aren't great in that IU basketball program. I wonder how many times Omar Ball is going to tell Mike Woodson to F off this week. Going to be very, very. I wish I could be a fly on the wall and keep track, because I would set that over under like 3.5. Because the more you lose, the more frustrating it gets, and I feel like the more likely you are to tell your coach to F off. So when it comes to Indiana, I'm just kind of waiting on them to inevitably roll over. You know what's coming, right? You know that some of these stories are gonna break in a big way, and Mike Woodson will get fired, and it just feels like there's just a lot of apathy, a lot of we're gonna be okay, a lot of we'll see what happens. Just a lot of carelessness in that program, and that is the total opposite of what's happening at Purdue right now. Those guys are engaged. Those guys really care. Those guys are playing hard. They're getting better, right? That is still, I think, one of the most impressive things about Matt Painter. We can talk about the sets that he draws up, but to me, it seems like everyone who shows up there gets better. Zach Edey didn't show up as the National Player of the Year. He got a lot better over his 4 years there. Braden Smith is going to go from, streaky, turn the ball over too much freshman point guard that lost to Fairleigh Dickinson to All-American once again. Best point guard in the country. Could even win the National Player of the Year award. Like, that's how good he's been this year. Fletcher Lawyer, who isn't my favorite guy, he's gotten better. Defensively, he still struggles sometimes. That's more of an athleticism thing, but like he shoots the ball better now, and if he can put the ball on the floor twice and hit a pull-up jumper. Like that wasn't a consistent shot for him when he first showed up at Purdue. Trey Kaufman-Renn did the impossible the other day. Saw him make a left-handed hook shot. Players get better when they show up at Purdue, and that should be their ultimate selling point. It's like, hey, like we aren't going to pay you as much, but if you come here, you're going to get better, and because of that, you're going to have an opportunity to play professionally. Purdue, it's just everything that Indiana isn't. Indiana doesn't. They don't develop players. They just kind of throw money at really talented guys and hope and pray that it all fits together. Meanwhile, Matt Painter's like, you know what? No, we're going to go grab the right guys for our system that are skilled, and we will mold them into whatever we need them to be. And they'll do it because they're not super talented and snobby like guys like Omar Ballo and Trey Galloway and the rest of those guys. Coming up here in about 25 minutes, Zach Pereles of CBS Sports. He's going to join the show. We're going to talk a little more NFL, Bengals, Bills, Chiefs, all that kind of stuff. When we come back, though, here in about 4 minutes, Top 10 Tuesday, I've got an Indiana-themed one, like the state of Indiana. So Top 10 Tuesday, Indiana-themed. I'll give you the full theme when we come back here in about 4 minutes.
Often imitated, never duplicated. The real Jonathan Smith Show. This is Indy Sports Ticket 1430 AM, 93.9 HD2, and always on the free Indy Sports Ticket app.
What's going on? The real Jonathan Smith Show here on Indy's Sports Ticket. Hopefully you're having a nice week. Tuesday, week is off to a pretty solid start. Watched a lot of hoops last night. That Iowa State-Arizona game was amazing. Hopefully you stayed up and you caught that. If you didn't want to stay up, then you should have watched Rockets Celtics. That game was a lot of fun too. Amen Thompson, dude's so good, so athletic. Anyway, Top 10 Tuesday, as we do every single Tuesday. It's just a list of, whatever I want it to be. And I was thinking about Indiana basketball and just the state of the program right now and how hard they are to root for. Because it seems like things just never really come together for them. So for today's Top 10 Tuesday, we're doing the 10 easiest teams in the state of Indiana to root for. Number one at the top, it's the Pacers. It's got to be the Pacers. No one's ever mad at the Pacers. We only pay attention to them when they're good. And they're good right now. Tyrese Halliburton, Pascal Siakam, very likable, seems somewhat normal. There's no LeBron James drama. There's not a lot of stupid. Rick Carlisle seems to have a pretty firm grip on that roster. They're good. They're competitive. When you go to their games, it's always a good time. Pacer games are an absolute blast. Ask anybody who's ever been to one. It is hard to not have a good time at a Pacer game. It's impossible to not have a good time at a Pacers playoff game. Okay? Pacers, they are the easiest team to root for in the state of Indiana. Number two, the Indiana Fever. Who doesn't like Caitlin Clark? She's lightning in a bottle. Okay, there's that 3-on-3 women's league. Haven't watched it. Won't watch it. Don't care to watch it. Most people that I talk to are in the same boat. If Caitlin Clark was playing in it, you better believe I'd be watching that. But everyone seems to care about her and the Fever. I'm going to go see my grandmother-in-law tonight to help her put up some Christmas decorations and things. And I guarantee you that when I show up, she will ask me very quickly, within 5 minutes, about Caitlin Clark. She's going to ask me something about the Fever, and then she's going to tell me how she watches every single Indiana Fever game. Everyone loves them. Caitlin Clark's amazing. The reason why I have them 2 and not 1 is because they're just a little more controversial because of the way that the WNBA is ran and all of those things. So I have them second because of that. Number 3 is Indiana football. Okay? They're a feel-good story. Came out of nowhere. The losingest college football program in college football history. All of a sudden, this guy named Curt Cignetti shows up, takes a syringe, and just injects life into that program. Okay, and all of a sudden, they're winning games, and they're beating Nebraska, and they're in the college football playoff, and they're going to Notre Dame, and there's just all this energy and all of this excitement. And Curt Cignetti's talking about how they beat the crap out of ranked teams, which isn't true, but hey, whatever you say, Curt Cignetti, and he's just, shows up and he just kind of fired everybody up. And they're very easy to like right now because they're this new feel-good story, even though Curt Cignetti runs his mouth as much as he does. If they don't, win playoff games and stuff, then, that'll be really annoying. But as of right now, it's fun. It's endearing. They're easy to root for. There are Purdue fans rooting for Indiana football. Like that is how easy it is to root for this Indiana football team right now because they've just been bad for so incredibly long. Number 3 is Indiana football. Number 4, Purdue basketball. Matt Painter's likable, nice guy. When he talks to the media, he sounds very just nice and respectful. There's not a lot of stupid, okay? You're not hearing stories of players telling Matt Painter to F off. Pretty amazing, I know. They play an entertaining style of basketball. They've had good players come through there in recent years. Jaden Ivey, Carson Edwards, Zach Edey, now Braden Smith. We'll see if any one of these freshmen end up being kind of that next guy. They play together, and they're just a lot of fun to watch. They're a very easy team to root for because, once again, there's not a lot of stupid. Number 5, I have the Colts. And, they have to be top 5. They're the only professional football team in the state. But Chris Ballard at the helm, there's just a lack of energy and excitement around that program. And it's been like that since Andrew Luck walked out that door. There was a brief resurgence these last 2 years, just, revolving around the excitement for Anthony Richardson. Like, oh, we took this guy, fourth overall, and, he's 6'4", and he can dunk a basketball, and he thinks he could average 12 points in the NBA, and he's got a 40-inch vertical, and he can throw the football over those mountains over there, and all of those things. So like there's excitement, or there was that brief excitement around the Colts during that time. And then this year happens, and we learn how ingenuous, that Anthony Richardson is. And then, now it's just kind of like, all the air got sucked out really quickly in terms of how hopeful and easy the Colts were to root for. So I have them at 5. Number 6, I've got the Indy Ignite. And you're like, Jonathan, the who? The Indy Ignite. That's a new volleyball team here in Indy. Volleyball is a great sport to watch. The fact that it's not more popular is baffling to me. A lot of athleticism on display. People love the dunk in basketball, the spike in volleyball. Is it the same? No, but it's similar. Okay. And the famous words of the NBA Jam announcer, the only thing better than a dunk is a block dunk. Blocks in volleyball are electric. A lot of athleticism is on display. But here's the thing with the Indy Ignite. Like, they're new. And people enjoy things that are new. So I have them at 6. Number 7, I've got the Indianapolis Indians, AAA baseball team. They always play hard. Paul Skeens was here, and, those stands were absolutely packed. And you've got pitchers and hitters coming up that are high-valued prospects and guys that are, they once again, like, playing hard because trying to earn a spot on a Major League Baseball roster. Very easy to root for. Okay, number 8, we've got Purdue football. Barry Odom showed up. He just might inject some life into that program. Things are pretty dire right now, but like there's at least a little bit of hope there. New coach, maybe he gets this thing turned around. He went to UNLV, who hadn't won 6 games in like 5 or 6 years, and this last year they're fighting for a chance to be in the college football playoff. And so, Barry Odom shows up, injects a little bit of life into that program. Purdue's never really been good at football. So if they were to turn things around, like they'd be very easy to root for in a pretty similar fashion to Indiana football this season. Number 9, we've got the Indy Fuel hockey team, minor league hockey team. Hockey's a blast. I wish we had a pro team, but especially minor league hockey, because those guys are just showing up to fight each other. And the refs are just kind of like, all right, go ahead, fight, do your thing. Gloves get dropped, and, fighting on ice looks like absolutely no fun whatsoever. Number 10 on the list, the last spot, I think the hardest team to root for right now is Indiana basketball. And part of that is the expectations that people have, like every team that I laid out in front of them has a lesser expectation than what Indiana basketball has. There is not a sports team in the state of Indiana held to a higher standard, held to a greater expectation year in and year out than Indiana basketball. People want them to be good so badly. And because of that, fans do the thing where they tell themselves whatever they have to be excited about the next game or the next season. Okay. And the issue is Indiana basketball, and I think part of why they're hard to root for right now is because they just never live up to these expectations. They never do. Archie Miller, so excited. Oh, we got Archie Miller. Here we go. Didn't work out. He moves on. Oh, we got Tom Crean. He coached Dwayne Wade at Marquette. Watch out, Tom Crean. He's going to get it rolling. And, they beat Kentucky at Assembly Hall. And I'll never forget watching that game on TV. And it was cool. Cody Zeller was good. Like they were a really good basketball team. And they had it going for a year. And then things just kind of fell off. And he was there, 8 years? Only made the tournament 4 times. Never made it to the Elite 8. Once again, like Tom Crean just couldn't meet the expectations that were set before him. And now you got Mike Woodson, who's underachieved more than Archie Miller and more than Tom Crean. Like he's got all this talent. Media voted Indiana to finish second in the Big Ten this year. And they aren't going to be anywhere close to that. If they finish eighth, that would be awesome. That'd be awesome. It would be. But it's not going to happen. Okay? Once again, 3 coaches into this. Or the last 3 coaches have done nothing but consistently underachieved really ever since, Coach Knight left. They've done nothing but underachieve. They just never live up to the expectations set before them. And that's problematic. Like that makes it hard to, be like, oh, they play at noon today. Let me schedule my day around this. Like that's when for me at least, that's when I know that my favorite teams have it rolling. When I'm like, oh, Arkansas plays at 9:00 tonight. Let me clear my schedule. Make sure I'm on the couch with some popcorn and having a blast. And I don't think that people do that for Indiana basketball right now. There's a lack of excitement. There's a lack of looking forward to it. And when games start, even when they're playing well, like Sunday, they go on that 17-6 run. They battle all the way back after being down by 10. And still, it's like, oh, they might win this game, but they're going to figure out some way to mess this whole thing up. And that's just kind of who they've become. And it's so tough to, continue to root for a team with as much passion as Indiana basketball fans want to root for them. For Lick chiming in over on the YouTube, the YouTube chat, if you want to be part of the show and comment and join the conversation, head over to YouTube, search for Indy Sports Ticket, subscribe, and do all those things. Lick saying, if IU loses by more than 18 is a weird number. Fire Mike Woodson at the post-game conference, ? They're not going to do that. They're not. One thing that, I do believe to be true is schools don't like firing alumni. They don't, no matter how bad, if you get fired as an alumni, then you did a terrible job, right? Because, who wants to fire one of their own? Like, could you imagine, having a kid and, let me think. I got a buddy back in Arkansas. He fixes AC units. That's what he does. Went to school for it. Graduated. His dad owns a business. He's working for his dad. Thankfully, my buddy's really good at what he does. But could you imagine being his dad and if he sucked at it, having to be like, hey man, I don't think that this is for you. So we're gonna have to let you go. That is not a fun thing. I don't think that schools want to do that because I would like to think that schools like keeping positive relationships with their former players and former coaches. I'd like to think that. That's probably not true. But, yeah. So, Mike Woodson, if he got fired in season, I'd be really surprised. They'll wait till after the season if they even decide to fire him. Because, I know we all think he's gone, but we have no idea. We have no idea whatsoever as to what they're going to do or anything like that. They could look up and be like, all right, we think that we want to fire him. And then they can, from there, go on and all right, what about, the list of 6 names in this drawer of people that we could potentially have replace him. And if none of those guys want the job, then they're not going to move off of him. And you say, oh, well, it's Indiana. Why wouldn't someone want the job? I'm just not convinced that, look, the Indiana job's interesting. Because that if you show up and if you revive this program, you're going to be a legend for forever, right? Because it's been, 30 years? Probably 30 years since Indiana was consistently good year in and year out. I guess that their last run to the Final Four would have been 2002, if I remember correctly. And so if someone else shows up and is able to revitalize the program, that's a very enticing thing. Indiana's got money. Clearly, they're forking out all this money for Trey Galloway and Omar Ballo and these guys. So from that perspective, it's very attractive. But, there's a lot of crap that comes with being the head coach at IU for basketball. I equate it a little bit to Ryan Day at Ohio State. It's like you lose 2 games as the head coach at IU, and people are calling for your job. At least that's what it feels like. So, like, there's a lot of good things about the Indiana basketball job. The money, the appreciation from the fan base. Like, it is a fan base that is dying to win games. But like the downside of that is, man, you lose 2 in a row and they're ready to slit your throat, man. They're ready to slit your throat. It's honestly pretty incredible. So we'll see what they wind up doing with Mike Woodson. Once again, I'd be really surprised that they fired him in season, just because I don't think that schools like firing alumni. Like, they don't. And if they do, they want to embarrass them as little as possible. And also, from everything I've heard about these assistant coaches, we don't want an interim coach. We don't want one. Let Mike Woodson ride it out and get rid of all of them at the end of the season, if that's even what they wind up doing. Because once again, we really have no idea. Zach Pereles of CBS Sports, writer, does a lot of stuff on the NFL and everything else, really. He's set to join the show coming up here in about 5 minutes. We'll put a bow on AFC and NFC championship games. Commanders, Eagles. What does their future kind of look like? Chiefs, Bills, McDermott. What's his future look like? Look, if I was the Bills, I'd go hire Belichick immediately. But hey, what do I know? Zach Pereles of CBS Sports joins the show here in about 5 minutes.
It's time for the real Jonathan Smith Show. This is Indy Sports Ticket 1430 AM, 93.9 HD2, and always on the free Indy Sports Ticket app.
What's going on? It's the real Jonathan Smith Show here on Indy's Sports Ticket. Hopefully you're having a nice week. Thanks for tuning in no matter how you're tuning in, whether that's YouTube, Twitter, the Indy Sports Ticket app, whatever you're using. It is greatly, greatly appreciated. Joined by Zach Pereles of CBS Sports. We're going to talk a little NFL football, put a bow on the AFC and NFC title games from Sunday. Zach, what's going on, man?
Good morning. Good morning. Yeah, it was great championship Sunday. I mean, obviously NFC was a little bit more of a blowout, but AFC, like everything that you could ask for in a football game between those two quarterbacks.
It was. And I want to start with the NFC. I keep thinking back to last year and the Houston Texans, and they make this, they win their division, they win a playoff game, and then this year everyone loves Houston coming into the season, and then they go 10-7 and didn't really get any better. How likely do you think it is that we see something similar from Washington this next season?
Yeah, that's a great point. I was at the Commanders' locker room clean out day yesterday, and it didn't feel like a normal clean out day. It obviously felt the same because they had lost and the season was over without them winning at all. But there was a little bit more hope. And I kind of wrote about how, yes, there is hope. And yes, Jaden Daniels was terrific. But the way to take that next step is to continue to hit on all of those key ingredients. They have to continue to build in the trenches. They have to continue to build that offense around Jaden Daniels. He could use probably some more weapons, certainly a downfield guy, someone to complement Terry McLaurin. But yeah, I mean, the NFL, it stands for National Football League, but it also stands for not for long. And the biggest thing is when you get that rookie quarterback, you have 100% have to continue to hit on things. That's what separates a team like maybe the Bengals from a team like the Chiefs. Like, if you look at what they've done, obviously Patrick Mahomes is that guy, but the Chiefs have just continued to hit on draft picks. They've continued to hit on free agent signing. Like, it seems like every button they've pushed around Patrick Mahomes has worked. And obviously Patrick Mahomes is Patrick Mahomes. Whereas the Bengals, it's kind of been like they've missed on a lot of guys defensively if you look at their drafting the past few years. So, yeah, I would say, it's too early to tell. The Commanders have a lot of options this offseason. And if they hit, then you're talking about a team that can continue to be very good. But the NFL, it's so hard to win even one game. Jaden Daniels talked about, someone asked him, what was your, most memorable moment this year? And obviously he had a ton of them. He said his first win, which was against the Giants in week 2, because he knows how hard it is to win. So it's hard to know, but you certainly bring up a good point. You look at a lot of the quarterbacks who have had great rookie success that first year and quote unquote arrived early. Not all of them went on to do bigger and better things. So this next step for Washington is huge. And Adam Peters, the GM, I thought did a great job this year building a roster that could support a rookie quarterback. I'm really excited to see what he does to enhance that second-year quarterback and elevate the talent around him.
It'll be interesting because going from non-playoff team to playoff team, I think is easier than going from making the NFC title game to making the Super Bowl and maybe even winning it. I am curious, do you think Jaden Daniels won enough games this year for his mom to now allow him to date in the offseason?
I sure hope so, because the bar is going to have to – I don't know what the bar is. It's going to have to go 17-0.
Yeah. That story to me is – it's great. Like, mom watching that for her kid, that's great. But, man, bro's like 24. That sounds terrible. I want to switch gears to the Eagles. They're just – I think the second best roster in the league. I think a healthy Lions team was more talented than the Eagles, but if you wanted to tell me it was Philly, I'm not going to get super upset about it. And part of that is I'm curious your thoughts on, like, do you think that the lack of required production from Jalen Hurts could potentially hurt the Eagles in the Super Bowl if he, because look, like, you're playing Mahomes, like Jalen Hurts is going to have to make plays. Do you think the lack of him being forced to do that throughout the season could hurt them a little bit in those big spots just because he's not used to doing it?
Yeah, I was certainly impressed by Jalen Hurts this past week. Like, I thought that was the best he has looked in a long time. The biggest thing to me is that the Eagles are never in positions to have to lean on Jalen Hurts. I was looking at this stat. Obviously, they had the slow start. I think since week 5, the Eagles have run about 30 or 40 plays while trailing in the second half. And, like, the next closest team was at 100 something. Like, they just get up and then they grind you down, and that defense is excellent. So I would, I'm going to be really interested if the Chiefs, with all this extra time to prepare, have a really strong opening drive like they did against the Bills. And if they can get up 10 points, I'm going to be really interested to see what Jalen Hurts' response is. It's just so difficult because when you have such a good running game and you have such a good defense, and you throw in the fact that while the numbers aren't great, like, Jalen Hurts can hit these big passes to Devontae Smith and A.J. Brown. Like, it's just like Jalen Hurts hasn't needed to put up big numbers. He's needed to take care of the ball, and that's kind of been enough. So I'm going to be really interested to see, will they finally face a game script where he has to put up the numbers? And I certainly think he can. Like, you look back 2 years ago at that Super Bowl, he had one of the best performances by a Super Bowl losing quarterback ever. So I'm going to be really, really interested. I thought he took a big step forward this past week, but that Chiefs defense is a whole different than Washington's.
Yeah, that's a great point there at the end. Joined by Zach Pereles of CBS Sports. He's got a bunch of articles up over at cbssports.com. Make sure you head over there and you check out his writing because he writes really good stuff. Yeah, that's a great point. Like, playing against the Chiefs and Spags in this defense is very different from playing against the Commanders, whose defense wasn't horrible, but it wasn't great either. Why do the Eagles seem to draft and build rosters better than anyone else in the NFL? Like, I feel like we're on this decade run of them having a really good team pretty consistently.
Yeah, I think that they draft terrific. Like, they just do such a good job. They obviously have a terrific scouting department, but they also, like, are so good in free agency and in trade acquisitions. Like, think back to the A.J. Brown trade from the Titans. Like, that has been one of the most lopsided trades we've seen in recent memory. Like, A.J. Brown, they got him for a first-round pick who turned out to be Treylon Burks, who just hasn't had, close to the career that the Titans had hoped for. And that, that is one of many, many examples of the Eagles just making really shrewd moves. And then you couple that with, outstanding coaching, like offensive line coach Jeff Stoutland. Like, he is just so good at getting the most out of these guys. It's like every first or second or third or even later round pick turns into a stud, turns into a starter, turns into a valuable contributor. So they just have done such a good job. I think the biggest thing is they are so aggressive. Like, they are like, hey, we're going to go get A.J. Brown. They made another trade with the Saints, who I believe moved up to draft Trevor Penning, and that didn't go well for the Saints. And the Eagles just crushed that trade as well. So they're super aggressive. They are one of the most aggressive teams in terms of spending. They know that they have a championship caliber team. When all of these teams were like, oh, should we pay Saquon Barkley this extra $1 million or two? They were like, let's go ahead and get the best running back in the NFL. So they're just I love their aggressiveness. And the thing is, when you are that aggressive and when you do have that good coaching and talent development, you can afford to miss here or there. Like, they drafted Jalen Reagor over Justin Jefferson. So it's not that they're perfect. It's that they are so aggressive, and they can be aggressive because they're well coached and they find talent everywhere.
You bring up the coaching and how well coached they are, which is interesting because the reviews on Nick Sirianni are pretty mixed. What are your thoughts on him?
Yeah, so I think, it's a tough one. Like, there's no argument from me that, like, there have been ups and downs from Nick Sirianni. I think the coaching has been more like the position coaches that have done such a good job. But Sirianni, like, he has his ups and downs. He is an emotional guy. When it was looking bad early in the season, it was looking really bad in the way that he was interacting with fans and this, that, and the other thing. But I think that you have to give him credit for the way that he has bounced back after last year. Like, last year, that collapse was awful and things were not good in that building. And then, you have the slow start this year. I think you have to give him a lot of credit for he made big coaching changes in the offseason. It didn't look like it was going to work out early, but he has kind of helped. He is kind of the opposite of what his reputation is. He has helped steady that thing, and it has been really impressive. Obviously, it's a very talented roster, but he's done a good job of just making it steady, making it not so dramatic. And I wonder if that interaction with the fans early in the season was a turning point of, hey, I've got to be more steady. I can't be so volatile. But either way, like, he is surrounded by a lot of great coaches and a lot of great talent. And I'm not saying that that makes it easier for him, but I do think that that helps him be his best. Like, there's so much talent there, and he has obviously made big strides. So do I think he's the greatest coach in the NFL? No. But do I think that he deserves a lot of credit for the growth that he has displayed over the past year and a half? Absolutely.
Yeah, I'm with you. Like, I think he's got the highest winning percentage in the history of the NFL right now, which is, like you said, part of that's talent, but at the same time, we've seen bad coaching ruin really good talent. Joined by Zach Pereles of CBS Sports. I want to look at Chiefs Bills now. And look, I can talk about the Chiefs all day because they play great football, and I like watching great football. But there's one issue about talking about them. I have to talk about the refs, which I hate. How much of the blame, I guess, do you place on the refs for the Chiefs beating the Bills the other night?
Yeah, I mean, it's tough. Like, I struggle to talk about the refs just because this one, it didn't seem like so obvious or so frustrating like those flags that Patrick Mahomes gets. This one, it was like the Josh Allen 4th and 1 sneak, and it's impossible to ever overturn wherever it's initially spotted. So did they get a bad spot there? Maybe. It's close. And there are certainly moments where you could say that the Chiefs maybe got a little bit of a favored, a little bit of a favored ruling. That Xavier Worthy catch was pretty crazy. I wasn't sure how they were going to rule on that one. But again, it's like one or two plays that the initial ruling on the field, and it's a really close play and it's hard to overturn. If it goes the Chiefs' way initially, it's going to probably stay the Chiefs' way. So I wish that I had a better answer for you. I thought 2 weeks ago, certainly the Texans got, really the wrong end of a couple of plays, the sort of plays that have been really infuriating. If you don't like the Chiefs, those calls are just kind of inexcusable at this point. But I thought it was just kind of a more matter of circumstance of if they had given Josh Allen that first down on that scramble and the Chiefs had challenged, then the Chiefs would have lost the challenge because that's the way it was ruled on the field.
Yeah, that's sorry. That's kind of what I thought. I thought that the game was reffed really well, and even if you disagree and you think that the Xavier Worthy thing was ruled wrong and that the Bills got the first down, even though I don't think that they did, but either way, like, I feel like so much of this series between the Chiefs and the Bills in the playoffs has been Patrick Mahomes with the ball last with like a chance to go win it. And Sunday night, like it's Josh Allen with the ball potentially last. He's got it with 2 minutes left, and they just couldn't make the play. Why is it that Patrick Mahomes always makes the play, and whoever they're playing against never really seems to?
Yeah, I mean, I think the first thing, like the biggest thing that we have to talk about is Patrick Mahomes is the tide that raises all ships. Like, if you look at who finished off that game for them, it's Kareem Hunt and it's Samaje Perine. Like, it's not Travis Kelce. It's not one of those wide receivers. Like, and a big reason that Patrick Mahomes is so good is obviously him, but another big reason is Andy Reid he's just the best. Like, he knows what to call. He is absolutely outstanding in these game-ending scenarios. And then the reason that other teams can't do it, Steve Spagnuolo, like, this guy is a madman. I think he's been the best defensive coordinator in the game for a long time. You look at all the different blitzes that he brings, and it's not that he has so many different looks and so many different wrinkles. It's that he doesn't bring out his biggest wrinkle until the biggest moment. He brings out that one blitz like we saw on that 4th and 5. He brings out the one blitz that opponents have never seen before. He brings out the perfectly timed play call. And on defense in the playoffs, like, you're going to be facing stars. It's not going to be, can we limit them to this, that, and the other thing? It's, can we make the timely plays in the timely moments? Like, you look back at all these runs and you have Chris Jones sacks and Chris Jones, bat downs and all these other things. Like, it's just the timeliness in the biggest moments. On one side, you've got Patrick Mahomes, and on the other side, you've got Steve Spagnuolo. So they're almost the same in that it just seems like when you have to have in those biggest moments, the reason that they go the Chiefs' way all the time is Patrick Mahomes, Andy Reid, and then Steve Spagnuolo and a really talented defense.
Joined by Zach Pereles of CBS Sports talking about Chiefs and Bills from Sunday night. You know that the Bills are searching for answers. What do you think is the adjustment that they make this offseason to once again try and get over this Patrick Mahomes-sized hump?
Man, the Super Bowl's in New Orleans, like maybe a voodoo doll or something. I think there are some adjustments that they can make. I would love to see them continue to stock their wide receiver room. Like, you saw them kind of make this halfway move with Amari Cooper, and it just, Amari Cooper was good and in spots, but it wasn't as consistent probably as they like. And that's not really anyone's fault. It's really hard to join a team mid-season and be a huge, huge contributor. There's just so much that is going on. Like, you're just, it takes a month or two to even learn the playbook, really. So I'd love to see them maybe add a wide receiver. I'd really like to see them add some speed in the secondary. I think that Buffalo's corners are good. They are certainly physical and willing to tackle, but they need a little bit more speed, a little bit more athleticism. You just saw, like, there were several penalties that were legit penalties, especially after Christian Benford went down. Like, Kyer Elam had a tough game. So I would just like to see a little bit more investment, I guess, at receiver, and a little bit more investment in the defensive secondary. And you can always clean up the edges here or there. But, it's one of these things where, like, if you look at how the Chiefs have continued to stay a step ahead, obviously it's those big moments, but, like, the Chiefs drafted L'Jarius Sneed, and then they could let L'Jarius Sneed go because they drafted Trent McDuffie. Yeah. Like, just the continuing hitting on picks. In a very similar situation, the Bills, they drafted a late first-round cornerback in Kyer Elam, and it hasn't worked out. So it's just those little things. We can even talk about, like, Xavier Worthy versus Keon Coleman, who, the Bills skipped on Xavier Worthy. And it's those tiny little moments, I guess, here or there that have made the difference. So obviously these teams are right next to each other, and there are going to be little adjustments the Bills can make. They have some financial stuff to take care of, maybe a Josh Allen extension, but it's just got to be, they've got to hit on some guys. They've got to get a little bit faster in the defensive secondary. And I'd love to see maybe one more offensive piece, because Josh Allen, like, the guy is terrific, and they are going to be contending as long as he's there.
Yeah, that's exactly right. Joined by Zach Pereles of CBS Sports, talking Bills and Chiefs. Do you know who the 3 head coaches in the history of the NFL are to beat Patrick Mahomes in a playoff game?
Okay, so Bill Belichick. Okay, so I know Bill Belichick, and obviously the Bengals beat them, so that's Zach Taylor, I believe.
Yes.
And then they lost the Super Bowl to, is that Bruce Arians?
It is Bruce Arians.
Geez, that's such a great question. Like, and those teams that beat him were awfully special too.
They were. I don't think there's a better big game coach to have in the NFL than Bill Belichick. What would you think if the Bills fired Sean McDermott and hired him in the offseason?
Oh man, I think. I think Bill's pretty settled in right now, and I think it'd be tough for him to go to a division rival. Although I guess he's done it before already. I don't think that you can pin this one on Sean McDermott. I think that Sean McDermott, if anything, has done a really great job. They are so well coached defensively. It's just like, I think we're going to talk about Patrick Mahomes like we talked about, honestly, like Michael Jordan, like the teams that not in just like the greatest of all time, because maybe Patrick Mahomes doesn't get there, but we will absolutely talk about Patrick Mahomes like we talked about Michael Jordan in terms of the teams who he prevented from getting there. And the Bills are going to be like those Utah Jazz teams that never got over the top when Michael Jordan was playing. So I agree with you. Like, Bill Belichick, if you need one game plan to like absolutely shut down an offense, I remember that Super Bowl against the Rams, who had just destroyed everyone all year, and Bill Belichick comes in with a game plan to just completely stymie them. Like, I just think Bill's probably settled, and I think Sean McDermott has done a really good job. In a perfect world, maybe, but for now, I gotta say no. But I love the idea.
My thing with Sean McDermott is he's had 4 cracks at it. They're 0-4. And like you said, like he's this defensive-minded head coach. And when you look at their 4 losses to the Chiefs, they've given up 42, 38, 27, and then 32 on Sunday, which is only the second time all year that the Chiefs have scored 30 points in a game. So I'm just curious if there is something stylistically about the Bills and the way that Sean McDermott likes to play defense that advantageous isn't the right word, but it's just like a good fit for the way that the Chiefs like to run their offense.
Yeah, absolutely. I think those numbers, like, you cannot argue with them. I think it's just he's been really close, and like the Bills were the only team to beat the Chiefs starters in the regular season. I think that while obviously this trumps that by a lot, it's an example that it can be done. It's just playoff Andy Reid, playoff Patrick Mahomes, playoff. It wasn't even Travis Kelce, which is crazy. It's just so tough. Like, at this point in the season, you're going to need 30 points to win. You're going to need 30 points to win a playoff game, and it's just like it's so difficult to stomach, honestly. Like, I wish that I had a better explanation, but yeah, like Sean McDermott is certainly going to take a look in the mirror and say, why does this keep happening? I think you can probably attribute it to some of those early Chiefs teams, like holding them to 30 was a great thing. And then, this kind of second edition that's been not as explosive, but better defensively. Yeah, those are going to really hurt Sean McDermott. I think he's going to look in the mirror and say, this is a brutal one because we got injuries at cornerback and safety, which was probably the 2, worst depth areas of our team this year. and we got them at the exact wrong time. So it's, you just have to keep plugging away and plugging away and plugging away. And I think a little bit better personnel in that defensive secondary will help, but it's going to be a long offseason for sure.
Last thing for you, Zach, and I'll let you go. Do you have a lean yet on who you're going to pick between the Chiefs and the Eagles?
I think, honestly, and this has been my kind of way to think the whole time, is that I will never bet against the Chiefs. Like, when everything looked wrong last season, the offense stunk, I was like, I'm not betting against the Chiefs. When everything is they went 15-2, 15-1 with their starters, and it wasn't pretty, and they won a ton of close games, but they don't win those close games by accident. So I had, before the playoffs started, I actually had this Super Bowl matchup as my prediction, and I went with the Chiefs because how can you not? Like, if the Bills couldn't beat this Chiefs team, it just seems like it's not the best. It's not close to the best team they've had, and yet they just get it done every single time. I think that some of the Chiefs' strengths match up well with the Eagles. Like the Eagles' interior defensive line is outstanding, but the Chiefs' interior offensive line is really, really great as well. And again, like you kind of said it, like if this game is close in the fourth quarter, I'm going to give the lead to Patrick Mahomes. I'm going to give the lean to Andy Reid. I'm going to give the lead to Steve Spagnuolo. So right now I've got to go Chiefs. And like, I feel like someone should write a title on this Chiefs run and use the phrase that one of their rival owners, Al Davis, used to use, just win, baby. Like, that's what they do. And it's not an accident. It's not, sometimes it's luck, but it's not an accident. They are outstanding in the biggest moments. And here it is again, another one of those big moments. And I just think the Chiefs get it done.
Yeah, that's where I'm at. You mentioned, last thing for real, you mentioned this Chiefs team not being like the best version of the Chiefs. Do you think they're better than last year's Chiefs team?
That's a good question. I think that they have grown into be a better version than last year's Chiefs team. You look at like the strides that Xavier Worthy has taken. I think that they have grown into a better version than last year's team. It's close though, but it's just like I almost want to say it doesn't matter because they're just going to win regardless of how good they are.
Yeah.
But no, I think they've gotten better. I think Jalen Watson, low key, was a big return for them to put opposite Trent McDuffie. Like, those are two outstanding corners. And Patrick Mahomes just like continues to get it done. He's still Patrick Mahomes. I don't even know if he's gotten better than he was last year, but he is Patrick Mahomes. So that's good enough by itself. Yeah, I think that they're outstanding. I think that they're just as good and probably even better than they were last year. And I'm really excited to see if they can repeat what they did last year and the year before and a few years before that and a few years before that.
So, yeah, that's exactly right. Zach, thanks for your time, man. As always, you were great.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
You got it. That is Zach Pereles. You can check him out on Twitter at Zach_Pereles. Does a lot of writing over at CBSSports.com. He's got a newsletter with CBSSports.com. Like I said, just a really, really good writer. When we come back, here in about 4 minutes, we talked a lot of Chiefs and Eagles there. And this Colts team is nowhere close to either one of those teams. My thoughts on the Colts offseason when we come back here in about 4 minutes.
Unfiltered takes live here. The real Jonathan Smith Show. This is Indy Sports Ticket 1430 AM, 93.9 HD2, and always on the free Indy Sports Ticket app.
The Indianapolis Colts, they're so far away from being the Eagles or the Chiefs. I mean, like, it's not even close. You know, the quarterback play isn't good enough. You know, if you took Anthony Richardson and you made him the starting quarterback of the Philadelphia Eagles, the best roster in the NFL, they would not make it to the Super Bowl despite having a dominant offensive line and, you know, the best running back in the NFL this year and two great receivers and all those things. So when it comes to quarterback play, the Colts are so far away from being able to make it to the Super Bowl. When you look at the roster as a whole, if you took Patrick Mahomes and made him the starting quarterback of this Indianapolis Colts team, the Colts would not have won the AFC. They would have scored more points. The offense would have been a lot better. The offense would have been pretty good, probably, because the receivers are good. The offensive line's solid, needs some depth, but a pretty solid offensive line, good receivers that Patrick Mahomes would be able to elevate. The issue is, you know, the Colts had a bottom 6 defense this year in just about every single category that matters. So the roster's not close to where it needs to be. Quarterback play is not close to where it needs to be. There's just a long way to go. And Chris Ballard and Shane Steichen and the rest of the people in that Colts building have to win right now because their jobs are on the line, I would like to think. I'd like to think that Jim Irsay is going to be like, hey, like you can either win the playoffs this year or you can get out of my building that you've been stinking up for the last 9 years. I would like to think that. That may not necessarily be what happens. And then you look at the Colts' opportunities this offseason to really add players that can help them. They have 7 picks in this year's NFL draft. 3 of them, or excuse me, all 7 of them in all 7 rounds. So that's 7 opportunities to bring in players that could potentially impact your team for the better. But let's be really honest here about the NFL draft. Once you get past the 3rd round, early 4th round, it's tough to find players that can really help you as rookies in the 5th, 6th, and 7th rounds. Like a lot of those guys play special teams, which is obviously an important part of the game. But, you know, special teams are on the play or on the field for 8, 9, maybe 10 plays a game. That's really it. So it's tough to find guys that can show up and instantly impact your team in the draft. It's like, oh, well, what about free agency? You know, that really important tool that Chris Ballard never uses. Yeah, well, the Colts are going to be 18th in cap space this offseason with around $28 million available to them. Those numbers from overthecap.com. And that's just not a lot of money. Like, you can go get 2 good players with that. Maybe 3 if you get somebody at a position that's not uber important. Or you can spend all that money on Sam Darnold. And so I am very intrigued to see what the Indianapolis Colts, what Chris Ballard is going to do this coming offseason to make this roster better. Because it's, you know, like his job should be on the line. And this roster has to get better. Yes, Lou Anarumo coming in. I think he's going to help this defense. But you still need good players. You do. Like you still need guys who can, you know, actually make plays. Like part of why that 2021 Bengals defense was so good is because they had Trey Hendrickson, the guy who had 14 and a half sacks in like 15 games. It's absurd. Okay, like the Colts need more talent, especially on the defensive side of the football. And I just don't think that the Colts are going to have the opportunities needed to improve this roster enough for them to all of a sudden be better than the Texans. Unless, and this is, you know, very important to know, we change from last offseason. Say, well, Jonathan, what do you mean by that? The Colts have found themselves in the exact same place that they were in at this time last year. They are dependent upon young players taking their offseason seriously and getting better. Like last year, we sat around and we just hoped, I really hope Anthony Richardson gets better. Because if he does, you know, Colts could be pretty good. You know, I hope that Juju Brents does work in the offseason to get better and not get hurt this next season. And I hope that this player gets better. Like that's what it was last year. It was very reliant on players getting better and developing. And when you look at this recent history of the Colts, like they don't draft and develop players very well. Like they don't. And that is what this offseason is really going to be about. Does Leatu Latu come back a better player? Does Anthony Richardson improve? Does Jalen Jones, corner, does he get better? Do these players that are probably going to play meaningful snaps for the Colts next season, do they get better? And as I said, I don't have a ton of confidence in that. Like Josh Downs feels like the same kind of player that he was last year. Michael Pittman Jr. feels like the same kind of player, run routes over the middle, all that guy. That's it. Alec Pierce's numbers went up, but did he get better, or did he just finally have a quarterback who can throw the ball down the field and allow him to do the thing that he's good at? Jelani Woods hasn't gotten better. He was a second-round pick 3 years ago. Kwity Paye's gotten a little bit better, but not a ton. He hasn't made any big leap into being, a top 15 defensive end in football. Like, that hasn't happened. He's a solid player now. It's like there's two players in recent Colts history that have been drafted and have made big leaps in improvement. That would be Bernard Raymond, who went from an atrocious left tackle to being a solid starting NFL left tackle, and Nick Cross. Then again, for Nick Cross, that guy could only get better given where he started. And once again, we are relying on these young players to come back better. And due to the lack of development from these Colts players over the last couple of years, I just find it really hard to have any hope for the Colts next season. And certainly, Chris Ballard, actually, this probably won't happen. Hopefully, Chris Ballard looks around and he realizes that these guys aren't getting better, and he makes some sort of move to acquire more opportunities to get more players that could help them immediately. Maybe they cut somebody to create more cap space and, to be able to go out and sign more free agents. That probably won't happen. Maybe they trade someone like Jonathan Taylor or Alec Pierce for a player and a pick. Maybe, this one being the most likely, Chris Ballard does his favorite thing ever. And he takes that number 14 overall pick and he says, hey, Tyler Warren, we'd love to have you, but we're not going to take it. We're actually going to trade down and pick up a couple extra picks. I'm very intrigued to see if Chris Ballard does anything like that, because this Colts team needs an influx of talents, not at just 2 or 3 positions, but at 5 or 6. And I just don't think the Colts have the assets in the offseason in terms of the cap space and the picks that they have to address all of their needs. So they're going to have to do something, you would think, to allow themselves to acquire the players that they need to actually be able to put a winning football team on the field this next season. Either way, the history of this Colts team, relying on players in the offseason is just, it's not great. So something needs to be done to give them more cracks at the apple to acquire players that can actually come in and help them immediately. Indiana basketball is in shambles right now. Just a lot of issues. Omar Ballo apparently been telling Coach Woodson to F off in front of his teammates. And it's not great when you hear stories like that. The whole, he lost the locker room. Yeah, that's a cliche, but Mike Woodson, you got players telling you to F off and they do not care, then you've probably lost the locker room. And I went down a rabbit hole last night. My wife was gone. And I keep finding all this old Coach Knight audio, and the more I hear him talk and the more that I learn about him, the more intrigued I am to how he would have dealt with players in this NIL era. And I've got a clip from Coach Knight, kind of hinting at how I think he would have handled players nowadays. I'll play that for you when we come back here in about 4 minutes.
The best takes. The real Jonathan Smith Show. This is Indy Sports Ticket 1430 AM, 93.9 HD2, and always on the free Indy Sports Ticket app.
The real Jonathan Smith Show here on Indy's Sports Ticket. Hopefully you're having a nice start to your week. Indiana going on the road, not that far, up to West Lafayette on Friday night to take on Purdue, where they're going to get absolutely crushed. That game's not going to be close. I'm telling you right now. And part of why I think that is because, first and foremost, Purdue's just better than IU. Secondly, IU's got a lot of crap going on. Dan Dockage said on his show yesterday, which you can listen to here in about 15 minutes. He said yesterday he's got some sources telling him that players don't respect Mike Woodson. Apparently, there's been some instances where Omar Ballo has told Coach Woodson to, quote, F off. And, Coach Knight is just such an interesting figure. And, I was sitting across from Dan for 3 hours a day for the last year. I've heard so much about him, and I'm always just very curious of what Coach Knight would do in this day and age. And here's a clip of him talking about the best way to motivate players. And I think it answers the question of what would Coach Knight do if he were in this predicament with players not respecting him. Here's Coach Knight.
You can talk about all the motivational speeches and phrases and devices in the world, but the greatest motivator of all is your ass on the bench. There is no better motivator. Ass meets bench. Bench retains ass. Ass transmits signal to brain. Brain transmits signal to body. Body gets ass off bench and plays better. I mean, it's a hell of a sequence of things that takes place. Well, it might be for you guys.
Coach Knight being, unsurprisingly, exactly right. The best way to get guys to play well is to bench dudes because, everyone wants to play. With that being said, benching and taking someone's NIL money are the two best ways to get someone to play hard now. I did some research last night on NIL and how finding players and taking money away from them works. Since Indiana, the school, the basketball program, is not paying them directly, they cannot find players or reduce their checks. However, let's say Mark Cuban, for example, is paying Omar Ballo $500,000. Mark Cuban could come in and reduce the money based on what the contract says. That needs to happen immediately. Mike Woodson, Mike, you can do this while you're smoking your cigars and drinking your wine. Get on the phone, call these donors, call these boosters, and have them start reducing these players and their checks. Okay, like that should happen immediately because they're 14-7 and their best wins against USC, who didn't have their two best players in that game. Okay, that alone should result in all these players losing a decent chunk of change from their NIL deals. Now, I don't know all the ins and outs of these NIL contracts. If I did, then I probably wouldn't be here. But I have an idea on how they should work and how if I was coaching and if I was in charge of this kind of stuff, how I would structure all of these contracts. So for NIL stuff, I think that the salaries or the money should work how NFL contracts work. The base salary for these NIL deals should be incredibly low. Talking like 10, maybe 15% if the player's really good. 10 to 15% of your NIL deal should be guaranteed. So if your NIL deal is worth $100,000, then 10,000 of that should be guaranteed. Everything else should be incentive based. And most of the incentives should be team based. Pay them an X amount of dollars for making the tournament. Pay them an X amount more if they make the Sweet 16 or if they win the Big Ten regular season or if they win the Big Ten tournament or whatever it is. Like they have got to do something. This isn't just Indiana. I think every school should do this. Do something a little extra to get these guys to play just like a little bit harder. Oh, you mean I'll make an extra $20,000 if I make the tournament? Yeah, sign me up for that. What do you need me to do, coach? $20,000. That's a lot of money to a kid between the ages of 18 and 23 years old. And, the base salary thing, it should be low because these guys don't have to do anything for this money. So there's a guy, this is just an example. So the Waltons who founded Walmart, graduates from the University of Arkansas. They've got NIL deals with these different players. And I'll never forget the quarterback of the football team at Arkansas. He would have to do these like 30-second Walmart ads on his Instagram like once a month. Okay? Like that is not worth $500,000 or however much they were paying him. That's worth like 10 grand. Maybe that. That's me being very kind. Okay? Fold in these incentives, make it team-based. That way these guys actually buy into whoever's coaching. That way they actually buy into winning basketball. Because just the idea of blindly handing out money to kids between the ages of 18 and 23 just doesn't make any sense. It just doesn't. You know, like we got all these super wealthy people handing out money, and it's like you got wealthy because you made good, smart decisions with your money. This is not a good, smart decision. Like, why is handing a 19-year-old a check for $250,000 or whatever? Like, how was that a good investment? I bet that the boosters at Kansas are really upset right now because they gave AJ Storr all that money to not even play. Okay, like there needs to be some sort of tweaking to how teams do these NIL deals. Make them incentive-based because for some reason, pride in yourself and competitiveness isn't enough for these guys to show up and play hard and want to win. But you start messing with their money, you start incentivizing them to win games and to make the tournament and to make a Final Four run and do all those things, then I think you'll see things change pretty quickly. Every team in the country should structure their NIL deals similar to that. Small amount guaranteed with a heavy emphasis on team and personal incentives. You know, like, look, if you're an All-American, bonus. That like cool, that works. But I find it very hard to believe that these wealthy people are happy seeing their money pissed away by college kids. And I'm sure if Mike Woodson called them, we're like, hey, we're 14-7, our best wins USC. Feel free to remove some of that money from Omar Ballo's account. I promise they'll be like, okay, I would love to do that. Because as of right now, paying, Omar Ballo and Trey Galloway and all these guys, all that money is not a good investment. Okay, like you're being paid to win games, not lose to Northwestern and lose to Nebraska again 4 times in the same calendar year. Something's got to change, and I think that the easiest way forward would be to change the way that IU pays players. That's going to do it here at the Real Jonathan Smith Show. Hopefully you enjoyed the show. I'll be back on the air tomorrow from 10 to noon. The Dan Dockett Show is following from noon to 3. Really good lineup today. 1 o'clock, Eddie White, who just got back from Paris with the Pacers. He's going to join. And then at 2 o'clock, the legend Jim Boeheim, former Syracuse head coach. He's going to join the show as well to talk a little college hoops. And probably Caitlin Clark, because as we know, Coach Boeheim loves Caitlin Clark. Thanks again for taking the time out of your day to listen to my show. I'll be back on the air tomorrow from 10 to noon. I will talk to you then. The Dan Dockett Show comes your way here in about 5 minutes.